Everyone in Chicago knew the name Dario Vanni. They knew it the way you know the shape of a thing in the dark, before your hand finds the edge of it. Doormen straightened their spines when his car turned onto a street. A room full of loud men went quiet when the elevator doors opened, and he stepped out, unhurried, a man who had never in his life arrived anywhere he was not already expected. What almost no one knew was that the most dangerous person in any room Dario Vanni walked into was the woman who stood half a step behind his left shoulder, the one nobody looked at twice. The one in the plain dark dress. The one who poured the wine and remembered every face and never raised her voice. Her name was Lena Crow. The night Dario told her he had never loved her, he signed the death warrant of everything he had spent 20 years building. He just didn't know it yet. By sunrise the next day, there would be no Vanni operation left, only the cleanup and a man in chains who finally understood what he'd thrown away. It began at a party. The Vanni estate sat on the North Shore behind a wall that ran for half a mile and gates that cost more than most houses. That night, the windows blazed gold against the lake, and 300 of the most powerful and most poisonous people in the Midwest moved through the rooms with glasses in their hands. Senators who pretended not to know whose money funded them. Judges who had ruled the way they were told to rule. Men who ran half the docks on the Great Lakes and laundered the proceeds through laundromats and parking garages, and a chain of family restaurants that genuinely did serve excellent veal. At the center of it stood Dario. He was 46, and he wore it like a blade wears an edge. Dark suit, no tie, a watch that did not announce itself because it did not need to. He had a stillness that made other men nervous, because stillness in a powerful man usually means he is deciding something, and what he is deciding is often about you. He laughed when laughing served him. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, people leaned in, and he used the half-second of their leaning to read everything their faces gave away. He had built the Vanni operation from the ruin his father left behind. The old man had been a brute, all fists and fear, and brutes do not last. Dario understood the thing his father never grasped, which was that fear is expensive and loyalty is cheap if you know how to buy it. He bought it in favors. He bought it in protection that actually protected. He bought it in the simple, addictive feeling of being on the side that always won. By 40, he controlled the flow of money and influence across 3 states, and the federal prosecutors who wanted him could never make anything stick. He was, by every measure the world used to measure such men, untouchable. Across the room, carrying a tray of champagne she would never drink, Lena watched him work. She had been with him for 6 years. To the guests she was staff, and that was the point. A woman of perhaps 35, brown hair pinned back, a face you would describe afterward as pleasant and forget by the time you reached your car. She moved through the party the way water moves through a house, finding every room, touching everything, remembered by nothing. What the guests did not see, because they were not trained to see it, was that Lena never once turned her back to a door. That she had positioned herself, without seeming to, where she could see the 3 exits and the man at each of them. When a senator's hand drifted toward the small of her back, she stepped away a half-beat before it landed, smooth as water finding the low ground, and the senator never registered that he'd been refused. She set the tray on the bar. The bartender, a young man named Petrov hired 4 months ago, gave her a small nod. She returned it. Petrov was hers. So was the man parking cars at the front gate. So was the woman in the kitchen who had worked for the family 11 years and trusted Lena more than she trusted her own brother. Lena did not collect these people on purpose. She listened to them when no one else did, and remembered their children's names, and that turned out to be the same thing as collecting them. Dario found her at the bar 20 minutes later. He drifted over with a glass in his hand, stopping close enough that anyone watching would think he was giving an instruction to a member of staff. To anyone watching, that is exactly what it looked like. "The Calabrians," he said, not looking at her, looking at the room. "Both of them came. The younger one is carrying. He's nervous about it. He keeps touching his jacket." She picked up a cloth and wiped the bar that did not need wiping. "He's not here to use it. He's here because the older one made him feel small in the car and he wants to feel like a man again. Watch his hands when his brother talks. They make fists." Dario was quiet a moment. This was the thing about her. He had men whose entire job was to read a room, and they brought him facts. Lena brought him the thing under the facts. And the older one. Wants the East Side roots. Thinks tonight's the night he asks. He's been drinking water, wants to be sharp for it. She finally looked at him, and for half a second the staff and master performance slipped, and there were just two people who knew each other very well. Don't give it to him tonight. Make him wait. He'll respect you more in the morning, and he'll spend the whole night afraid he insulted you by asking. You think I don't know how to handle Tommy Calabria. I think you're tired and you want this party over, and tired men give things away to make problems go away faster. She said it the way you'd tell someone they had a thread on their collar. Wait until morning. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his face that almost never moved. The world thought Dario Vanni was untouchable. The world was wrong, and the proof of it was standing in front of him in a plain, dark dress, wiping a bar that was already clean. He found Petrov at the far end of the bar and tipped his glass for a refill he didn't want, because it gave him a reason to stay. Tell me something, he said to Lena, low. The Marchetti kid, the one who came to me last month asking for work. You already gave him the answer. You said no. I said no. He turned the glass slowly. His mother called the house yesterday, crying, he's gone and signed on with the Russians instead, out at the rail yards. He let it sit. You told me to take him. I told you he was loyal and broke, which is the cheapest thing you can ever buy and the most expensive thing you can let your enemy buy instead. She refolded the cloth. Now he's loyal and broke for the Russians. You'll meet him again. He'll be pointing something at you. You're never wrong about people. It's unsettling. I'm wrong about exactly one person. She said it before she could stop it, and the moment it left her, she busied her hands with the tray so she would not have to watch him hear it. Who? She didn't answer. She picked up the tray and went to work the far side of the room, and Dario stood at the bar and watched her go, and the question stayed in him longer than it should have, the way a splinter stays. He had loved her for 4 years. He had never said it. In his world, the things you loved were the things they took from you, and the safest thing a man like him could do was make sure no one ever knew where his heart was kept. He had watched his father lose everything he cared about, one piece at a time, to enemies who simply followed the love like a trail of blood. So Dario kept Lena in plain sight by keeping her invisible. The maid, the girl who poured the wine. No one would think to take her from him, because no one would guess she was the only thing he could not afford to lose. It was, he had told himself for 4 years, the smartest thing he had ever done. It was about to become the stupidest. The trouble started near midnight, and it started, as trouble in that world so often did, with a man who could not stand to be made to feel small. His name was Salvatore Rizzo, and he was Dario's underboss, the second most powerful man in the room, and he had spent 15 years being reminded in 1,000 small ways that he was the second. A big man going soft, with a handsome face that had started to sag, who drank too much at parties because at parties no one needed him to be sharp. That night he had drunk a great deal, and somewhere around 11:30, he had decided that the source of all his troubles was a woman in a dark dress who thought she was better than everyone. He had noticed, over the years, the way Dario's eyes went to her, the conversations at the bar. He was not a stupid man, Rizzo, only a resentful one, and resentful men notice everything and understand none of it. He had built in the privacy of his envy a theory. The theory was that this waitress, this nobody, had her hooks in the boss, that she whispered in Dario's ear, that she was the reason Rizzo's advice got waved off, his proposals tabled, his ambitions managed like a child's. The theory was wrong about almost everything except the part where she whispered in Dario's ear, and that part was so right it terrified him. He cornered her in the hallway outside the kitchen, where the noise of the party dropped to a murmur, and the only light came from the sconces along the wall. You, he said, I want to talk to you. Lena set down the tray she was carrying. She did it without hurry, and she placed it on the side table so the table was between them, and she did all of this so naturally that Rizzo never saw it as the defensive movement it was. Mr. Rizzo, You think I don't see you? He came closer. He smelled of scotch and the cologne he wore too much of. 6 years you've been crawling around this house playing the little mouse. But I see you. I see what you're doing. I'm doing my job. Can I get you something? Coffee, maybe. Don't. His hand came up and pointed at her face, the finger trembling slightly. Don't you handle me. You handle him, not me. I know what you are. And what am I? She asked it quietly, and she should not have asked it, and some part of her that was very old and very tired knew it the moment the words left her mouth. Because Rizzo, who had been looking for a fight, heard in her calm the thing that enraged him most. He heard a woman who was not afraid of him. In his world there was no greater insult and no greater puzzle than a person who was not afraid when they had every reason to be. His hand moved from pointing to grabbing. He took her by the upper arm, hard, the way a man grabs someone he intends to frighten. What happened next happened too fast for him to follow. Her free hand came up and folded his grabbing hand back at the wrist, and her body turned, and the joint that connects a hand to an arm does not enjoy being asked to bend the way she asked it to bend. Rizzo made a sound that was high and surprised, and then he was on his knees on the marble, his arm extended at an angle that promised to become a break if he moved, and the woman in the dark dress stood over him with no more expression than she'd had wiping the bar. Mr. Rizzo, she said, and her voice had not changed at all, and that was somehow the most frightening part. You've had a great deal to drink. I'm going to let go of your hand, and you're going to go back to the party, and tomorrow neither of us is going to remember this. That's the version where you keep your dignity. Nod if you understand. He did not nod. He was a proud man and a drunk one, and he made the worst possible choice, which was to lunge upward, and she had to hurt him to keep him down, just a little, just enough, and he cried out. That was when Dario came around the corner. He had come to find her because the Calabria meeting had gone exactly as she'd said it would, and he wanted, in the private language they shared, to tell her she'd been right. Instead, he found his underboss on his knees on the marble, his face contorted, and the woman he loved standing over him in a posture that Dario, raised among violent men, recognized instantly for what it was. It was the posture of someone who knew how to end a man and was choosing, for the moment, not to. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. Then 2 more guests came around the corner, drawn by the cry. Then a third. Dario watched the scene reproduce itself in their faces, watched them see his underboss humiliated on the floor by a waitress, watched the story being born in real time, the story that would be in 20 mouths by the end of the night and 200 by morning. The story that the great Dario Vanni could not even control his own staff, that his house had a woman in it who put his own underboss on his knees. That something was soft, rotten, wrong at the center of the Vanni operation. In the world Dario lived in, perception was not a description of power. Perception was power. The moment people believed you were weak, you became weak, because they began to act as if you were, and acting as if you were weak was how they made it so. Dario made a decision in the space of a breath, and it was the worst decision of his life, and he made it for what he believed at the time were the very best reasons. Lena, his voice cracked across the hallway, let him go. She let him go. Rizzo scrambled up, cradling his wrist, his face a swollen mess of wine and shame and triumph all at once. He saw the boss's face. He saw that the boss was not going to side with the waitress, and a slow, ugly satisfaction began to spread through him. Boss, Rizzo started, I was just... Get out, go drink water, we'll talk tomorrow. Rizzo went, and he made sure to walk slowly, and he made sure to let the watching guests see his injured wrist, and he made sure the story would be told his way. Dario turned to Lena, and he raised his voice so the guests in the hallway could hear, so the guests behind them could hear, so by tomorrow everyone would know how the great Dario Vanni had handled the rot in his own house. You think you run this house, he said. You think because I let you whisper in my ear that you matter here, your staff, you pour wine. You put your hands on one of my men and you'll find out exactly how little you've ever meant to me. Lena said nothing. Do you understand what you are? He stepped closer, and his voice dropped, and this was the cruelty of it because the drop made it intimate, made it land, made it real. You're a girl I felt sorry for, 6 years ago you needed a place and I gave you one, and you've spent every day since then convincing yourself it meant something. It never meant anything. You were convenient. That's all you ever were." The guests were silent. Somewhere in another room, the party went on, music and laughter, the bright, meaningless noise of people who did not know they were watching the beginning of the end. "Say something," Dario said. Lena looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment, and in that look there was no fear and no anger, and that was the thing he would remember for the rest of his life, the thing that would wake him at 4 in the morning for years. There was no anger in her face. There was only a terrible understanding, as if he had finally, after 6 years, told her something she had long suspected and hoped she was wrong about. "You don't mean that," she said, very quietly, just for him. "You're scared and there are people watching and you don't mean it, so I'm going to give you one chance. Tell them you were angry. Tell them it's been a long night. We'll fix this in the morning." It was a door. She was holding a door open for him, and all he had to do was walk through it. But Dario Vanni had spent 46 years learning that doors were how they got to you. That the moment you showed someone you needed them, you handed them the knife. There were 300 people in his house, and 20 of them had just watched his underboss go down on his knees to this woman, and the king would not, be seen to need anyone. "I never loved you," he said. He said it clearly. He said it so they could hear. He said it to win the room, and he won the room, and that was the most expensive sentence Dario Vanni ever spoke. For a moment, Lena did not move at all. Then she nodded. A small nod, the kind you give when a difficult thing has been confirmed, and there is a strange relief in no longer having to wonder. She reached up and unpinned the little staff badge from her dress, the one with her name and the Vanni crest, and set it on the side table next to the tray, lining it up neat with the edge the way she lined up everything. "All right," she said. She turned and walked away down the hall, past the silent guests, who parted for her without quite knowing why, and out a side door into the dark, and Dario Vanni let her go because he had won, and a man who has just won does not chase the thing he has beaten. He went back to his party. He drank. He accepted the quiet congratulations of men who had seen him put a problem in its place. He told himself he had done what needed doing. He told himself he felt nothing, and for the first hour, drunk on victory and scotch, he almost believed it. He had no idea that the clock had started, that from the moment the side door clicked shut behind her, he had until sunrise. To understand the dark hours that followed, you have to understand who Lena actually was. To understand that, you have to go back 4 years to a night in that same house, when a woman who had come to destroy Dario Vanni first understood she had failed. It was a Tuesday, and the house was empty except for the two of them and the old woman who cooked, Marta, who had worked for the family 30 years and was dying. Lena had been with the Vannis 2 years by then, long enough to be furniture, long enough that Dario spoke freely near her the way men speak near a coat rack. She had nearly everything she'd been sent for. She had spent that very afternoon, while the house slept, photographing a ledger Dario believed existed only in a safe only he could open, and she had been wrong about exactly one thing, which was how she would feel when she heard him crying. She found him in the small back room off the kitchen, sitting beside Marta's bed. The old woman had slipped under that afternoon, and the doctor had said hours, not days. Dario Vanni, who ran 3 states, sat in a hard chair holding the hand of a dying cook, and his shoulders were shaking, and he did not hear Lena in the doorway. She should have left. She had been trained to leave. A person doing her job does not insert herself into a target's grief, because grief makes targets remember you, and being remembered is how people in her line of work die. She went in anyway. "You should sleep," she said. "I'll sit with her." "She has no one." He didn't look up. His voice was wrecked. 30 years she fed this family, and she has no children and no husband, and there's not one person on this earth who will be in the room when she goes except a woman she scolded for burning the garlic, and a man she used to slap with a wooden spoon. He laughed, and it broke in the middle. "She slapped me, last person alive who'd dare." "Then let her not be alone." Lena pulled the second chair to the other side of the bed and sat. "I'll take this hand." They sat through the night, the two of them on either side of a dying woman, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, Marta stopped breathing, quietly, the way the brave ones go, and Dario pressed the back of her hand to his forehead and held it there a long time. "You can tell people I wasn't here," he said finally, "if anyone asks where I was tonight." "Why would I tell anyone anything?" He looked at her across the body of the old woman, and it was the first time he had ever really looked at her, and Lena felt the floor of her whole careful life tilt under her. "Because everyone tells someone something," he said. "Everyone in my world is keeping a piece of me to spend later. You've been here 2 years and you've never once asked me for anything. I keep waiting for it. The ask. It never comes." He set Marta's hand down with a tenderness she would not have believed him capable of a year earlier. "Why doesn't it come?" And Lena Crow, who had a folder growing fat in a place no one knew, who had photographed his secret ledger 8 hours before, looked at this man weeping over a cook and gave him the only true answer she had. "Because I don't want anything from you," she said. "I just want you not to be alone in the room when it matters." It was the truest thing she had said in 2 years. It was also the moment she understood, with a cold drop in her stomach, that the job was over. Not the work. The work was nearly done. But the part of her that could finish it had died that night, quietly, the way the brave ones go, on the other side of Marta's bed. Because Lena Crow was not who Dario thought she was. 11 years before that party, in a federal building in Washington, a younger woman with a different name and a much harder face had sat across a table from 3 men in suits who offered her a choice that was not really a choice. She had spent 6 years in the part of the government that does not officially do the things it does, the part that sends quiet people into loud places and asks them to come back with the truth. She had a gift that could not be taught, the gift of becoming furniture, of making powerful men forget she had ears. She had brought down an arms network in Marseille as a translator no one remembered hearing. She had ended a trafficking ring in the Balkans by becoming the kind of woman bad men talked in front of because they had decided she did not matter. Then an operation had gone wrong, the way operations do, and people she was responsible for had died, and she had walked into that building and told the 3 men she was done. They had one last job, a man in Chicago, a man they had chased for 15 years and could not reach because he never wrote anything down, because he kept his secrets in his head and his head was very well guarded. "Bring us Vanni," they said, "and you bring us 100 other things, and then you can disappear into an ordinary life and never be found." One job, the last one. She had said no for 2 years. Ordinary did not hold a woman built the way she was built, and the men in suits knew it, and they were patient, and eventually a thing happened in her ordinary life that made the offer look different, and she said yes. So Lena Crow was born, and through a chain of arrangements so subtle that not even Dario's people ever traced it, she came to pour wine in the house of the most careful man in the Midwest. The plan was supposed to take a year: get hired, become invisible, become trusted, find the secrets and bring them home. The plan worked perfectly, right up until the night beside Marta's bed, when the woman who had come to destroy Dario Vanni discovered she would rather die than do it. The folder was finished in the 4th year. She would think about the folder later, in the dark in a house by the water. Somewhere very safe, somewhere not even her own handlers knew the location of, Lena had assembled everything. Account numbers, names, the structure of the entire operation, mapped and cross-referenced and documented to a standard that would stand up in any court in the country. The thing the men in suits had wanted for 15 years. The end of Dario Vanni, complete and waiting, needing only to be handed over. She finished it on an ordinary afternoon, alone in the room over the garage where she slept, and she sat looking at it for a long time, and then she did a thing she had never done in 15 years of the work. She picked up the secure phone, the one that did not exist, and she called the men in suits, and she lied to them. "It's not there," she said. "Whatever you thought he keeps in his head, it's compartmentalized worse than you modeled. I can give you pieces. I can't give you the structure. Nobody can. He's built it so nobody can." A pause on the line. The voice that answered was patient, and patience from those people was the most dangerous thing they owned. "You've been in 2 years past the timeline. And I'm telling you it can't be done the way you wanted it done. You want me to keep burning my life on a thing that isn't there, or you want me to come home with what I've got?" Another pause. "Stay, keep working it, something will surface." "Something always surfaces," she agreed, and hung up, and sat with the finished folder in her hands, the surfaced thing, the whole structure, complete, deliverable, lethal. And she got up and she hid it where she had hidden it, and she went downstairs and poured the wine, and she did not deliver it that year, or the next, or the next. Every month she did not deliver it, she fell a little further into a life she was not supposed to be living. She told herself she was waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment to destroy the person you love, and so the moment never came. 2 weeks before the party, she made a decision. She was alone in the room over the garage, and she took the folder out of its hiding place, and she set it on the narrow bed, and she looked at it the way you look at a wound that has finally stopped bleeding. Then she went down to the kitchen and asked the woman who cooked, the one who'd replaced Marta, for the long matches they used for the pilot light. She carried them back up. She held one against the striker. She was going to burn it, all of it. 6 years of the most patient work of her life, and her old name with it, and the men in suits could be told the operation had simply failed. She would be Lena, for the rest of her life, in the house of a man who would never know how close he had come to ruin and would never know she had saved him. She struck the match. She held it to the corner of the first page. And she could not do it. Not because she still meant to use the folder. Because burning it felt like admitting the woman who'd built it had ever existed, and Lena was not ready, even then, to put that woman in the ground. So she shook the match out, and she put the folder back in its hiding place one more time, alive, waiting, and she told herself she would burn it next week. She did not get to next week. She got the party. She got a hallway and a drunk underboss and 300 witnesses. She got Dario Vanni looking her in the eye and telling her, in front of all of them, that she had never meant anything, that she was convenient, that he had never loved her. She walked out the side door into the cold dark of the North Shore, and she stood a moment on the gravel with the lake breathing somewhere in the blackness ahead of her, and she made a different decision. She made it without anger. That was what Dario had seen in her face and not understood. Anger would have been survivable. Anger fades. What replaced the love in Lena Crow that night was cleaner and more final than anger. It was the settled clarity of a person who has finally stopped lying to herself. She had given up everything for a story. The man at the center of the story had just told her, in front of witnesses, that the story was not real, that she had been a fool, that the thing she had protected him for did not exist. All right, she had said, and she had meant it. She took out the phone he had never seen, the phone that did not exist, and she made the call she had been not making for 2 years. "It's me. The asset is live. I'm delivering tonight." A pause, a voice she had not heard in a very long time, careful, surprised. "Tonight, we can have a team ready by." "Tonight, everything. Wake the people you need to wake. By the time the sun comes up, there won't be a Vanni operation left to investigate. There'll just be the cleanup." She hung up, and she walked across the gravel to a car. One of her people had left exactly where she'd asked, and she drove into the dark to set fire to a kingdom. Inside the house, Dario Vanni accepted another drink and did not yet understand that he was already a dead man walking through the wreckage of his own life. He only knew the house felt strange, that something was missing from it, some sound he had stopped hearing years ago and noticed only now that it was gone. He told himself it was nothing. The first thing to fall was the money. At 1:40 in the morning, while Dario said goodbye to the last of his guests, transactions began to execute in financial systems across 4 countries. They had been prepared in advance, every one of them, by a woman who had spent 6 years learning exactly how the money moved and exactly which threads, when pulled, would unravel the whole cloth. Accounts the Vanni operation believed were invisible became, all at once, very visible, to exactly the wrong people. Funds that had taken years to launder clean turned dirty again in the space of an hour, frozen by institutions that had received, from a source they trusted completely, documentation they could not ignore. Money is the blood of an operation like Dario's, and at 1:40 in the morning someone opened every vein at once. The second thing to fall was the structure. Dario's genius had always been that he kept the operation in his head. He wrote nothing down. He trusted the architecture to memory, his own and the carefully compartmentalized memories of the men beneath him, so no single person, if turned, could give up more than their own small piece. But Lena had not been after a piece. Lena had spent 6 years in the one position from which the whole structure was visible, the position of the invisible woman who was in every room and counted by no one. She had watched the pieces meet. She had heard the conversations that connected them. She had assembled, in that folder, the map Dario believed existed nowhere but inside his own skull. At 2:15 in the morning, that map began to arrive in the hands of people who had wanted it for 15 years. Federal agents who had spent entire careers chasing Dario Vanni and hitting walls woke to phone calls that made them sit up in the dark. By 3, they were in their offices. By 4, they were filing for warrants that judges, roused from sleep, and shown what they were shown, signed without hesitation. Dario knew something was wrong at 2:50 when his phone rang. It was Bruno, his accountant, a careful man who had never in 15 years called in a panic. He was barely making sense. Frozen, seized, gone, all of it. Dario, I don't understand. It's like someone knew exactly where every. Slow down. Dario was already on his feet, already moving through the dark house toward his study, the scotch burning off him fast. Which accounts? All of them, the clean ones. The Caymans, the Liechtenstein structure, the Dario, the restaurants. Even the restaurants are frozen. The morning deposits won't. Listen to me. He had the study door open, the lights on, his other phone already in his hand. Move the Geneva Reserve. You know the protocol. Move it now while we're talking. A silence on the line that lasted too long. Bruno, move the Geneva Reserve. It's gone, Dario. Bruno's voice had gone very small. I tried it 9 minutes ago. The account's empty. It's not frozen. It's empty. Somebody emptied it before they froze the rest. Dario stood in his study with a dead reserve account in one ear and began methodically to fight. He called his consigliere. The man who answered his phone at any hour for any reason did not answer. He called the lawyer who had kept him out of court for a decade, the one he could wake at any hour. It rang out. He called the judge he owned. The judge's wife answered, frightened, said her husband had left 20 minutes ago and wouldn't say where. He called Rizzo. Rizzo answered on the 4th ring. There was noise behind him, a car, a road. Sal, somebody's hitting us. Everything at once. I need every captain at the warehouse on Cermak in 1 hour. I need. Where are you? What's that noise? I'm not coming, Dario. Rizzo's voice was thick, and under the thickness was something Dario had never heard in it, something close to fear and close to glee. You hear me? Whatever this is, it's got my name nowhere near it, and I'm keeping it that way. You humiliated me in front of 300 people tonight. I put a problem in its place. That's all that was. Yeah, a bitter laugh down the line. Funny thing about that problem, she's the only one not picking up either. The line went quiet a beat. You ever wonder, boss, how the feds got everything in one night? Everything. Like somebody handed it to them gift-wrapped. Another beat. You always did keep that little waitress awful clothes. The road noise swelled, and then Rizzo was gone, and Dario stood in his study with the phone against his ear and the dial tone in it, and the first cold finger of understanding touched the base of his spine. He made 4 more calls. The man who ran the docks. The man who ran the clubs. 2 captains who had sworn him blood loyalty over 15 years. One after another into the dark, and one after another the phones rang out, because the men on the other end were already running, or already arrested, or already sitting across tables from federal agents, offering to give up a man who no longer had anything left to protect them with. Because Lena had understood the thing Dario, for all his brilliance, never fully grasped. Loyalty bought with success evaporates the moment the success does. The men around Dario followed him because he won, and the instant they believed he had stopped winning, they did the arithmetic frightened men always do, and the arithmetic told them to save themselves. By the time the sky over Lake Michigan began to go gray, the Vanni operation, the thing it had taken Dario a lifetime to build, the thing 3 states had feared and 1,000 men had served, simply did not exist anymore. It had been a structure made of trust and money and fear, and in the space of a single night, all three had been taken out from under it at once, and the whole edifice had come down so quietly that most of the city would not understand what had happened for days. A king had gone to sleep on top of the world. He woke to nothing. Dario did not run. There was nowhere to run, and he was not, whatever else he was, a man who ran. He stood at his study window and watched the lake go from black to iron under a sky that had not decided to be morning. Down at the end of the long drive, headlights were turning in. A lot of headlights, more than any friend would ever arrive with. He understood, finally and completely, what had happened. Someone had known everything. The money, the structure, the names, the loyalty, the precise location of every load-bearing wall in the entire edifice of his power. Someone had been standing inside his house, at the center of everything, for years, watching, counting, remembering. He had told her, in front of 300 people, that she had never meant anything to him. He dressed. He made coffee in the enormous, empty kitchen where Marta used to cook, in the room off it where she had died holding his hand and Lena's. He sat at the counter and drank it and waited for the knock. And while he waited, he thought about the only thing left in the world he could not stop thinking about, which was the look on Lena's face when she said, "You don't mean that," and held the door open, and he had spat in her open hand instead of taking it. The knock came. He let them in himself. He held out his wrists. As they walked him down the long drive in the cold morning, past the silent house and the empty gates, he asked the agent beside him one question, the only one that mattered. The woman, the one who did this, did she leave a message, anything? The agent, a tired man who had waited 15 years for this morning, looked at him with something almost like pity. There was no woman. We got an anonymous package, everything we ever needed all at once. No name on it. He paused. Whoever it was didn't want anything, no deal, no protection, nothing. They just wanted you to fall. Dario Vanni, walked in chains down the drive of the kingdom he had lost in a single night, began, very quietly, to laugh, because he understood now what she had wanted. She had wanted nothing, exactly as he had always believed. She had only ever wanted nothing. The trouble was she had once wanted him, and he had been too frightened to know it, and a man who tells a lie to win a room will lose everything that matters in the dark that follows. That should have been the end of it. A king falls, a kingdom burns, and the woman who burned it disappears into the new life she earned, free at last of the men in suits and the man in chains, free to be ordinary in some quiet town where no one would ever know the things she had done. For 14 months, that is how it went. Lena Crow ceased to exist the morning Dario was arrested. The men in suits were as good as their word. They gave her a name she would keep private, and a face that was very slightly not the face she'd had, and a small house in a small place a long way from Chicago, near water, because she had found over the years that she could not sleep without the sound of water nearby. She had earned her rest. She took it. She told herself every morning that she felt nothing, in exactly the way Dario had told himself he felt nothing on the night it all began. They were more alike than either of them had ever admitted. That was always the trouble. She did not follow his trial. She knew how it would go because she had built the case herself, brick by brick, and built it to be unwinnable. He was convicted on enough counts to bury him. The newspapers called it the most complete dismantling of an organized crime operation in the history of the state. They never could explain where the evidence came from. An anonymous source, the official story said. A miracle, said the prosecutors, who did not believe in miracles and spent the rest of their careers quietly wondering. But Lena Crow could not lie to herself for long. It was the one weakness in an otherwise flawless instrument. She had spent 6 years pretending, and the pretending had become real, and you cannot make a real thing unreal by moving to a house near water and refusing to read the newspapers. She had destroyed him because he told her she meant nothing. And every morning for 14 months in the quiet by the water, the same thought arrived with the dawn and would not leave. He had been lying. She had known it even as he said it. She had said it to his face. You're scared, and there are people watching, and you don't mean it. The cruelest thing Dario Vanni had ever done was also the most frightened, and she had burned his entire world down anyway. in the cold, clean certainty of her own heartbreak, and called it justice. It had not been justice. She knew the difference. Justice does not wake you at 4 in the morning. Justice does not make you stand at a window watching water you cannot sleep without, wondering whether the man in the cell deserved the truth you never let him say in private. She had wanted nothing, the agent had told him, and on the night she did it that had been true. It was not true anymore. After 14 months in a house by the water, Lena Crow found she wanted something after all. She wanted to look him in the eye one more time and know if she had been right about the thing under the cruelty, or whether she had thrown away her whole life avenging an insult from a man who had simply, finally, told her the truth. She told herself it was closure. People about to do something unwise often tell themselves it is closure. It took her 3 months to arrange the visit. She still had the skills, and she still had, here and there, the people, and a woman with her gifts can become almost anyone on a visitor's form. She became a lawyer named in the system as part of an appeal that did not really exist, and on a gray afternoon 17 months after the worst morning of Dario Vanni's life, she walked into a federal prison to see the man whose kingdom she had burned. They brought him into a small room with a table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs, and a guard outside a window of reinforced glass. He was thinner. The stillness was still there, but it had changed its nature. In the old days, his stillness had been a man deciding things. Now it was the stillness of a man who had run out of things to decide and was trying to make his peace with that. He looked at her and did not recognize her, because of the small changes to her face. And for a moment she understood she could conduct a fake legal conversation and leave, and he would never know, and she could go back to her water and tell herself she had looked her closure in the eye. Instead, she sat down across from him, and she folded her hands on the table the way she used to fold them when she set down a tray, lining her fingers up neat with the edge. Dario Vanni went very still, in a new way, because there was only one person in the entire world who had ever arranged her hands like that, and he had spent 17 months teaching himself never to think about her again. "It's you," he said, barely a sound. "It's me." For a long moment, neither said anything. The guard shifted outside the glass. Somewhere far off in the building, a door closed with the particular flat boom that prison doors make. "They told me there was no woman," Dario said at last. "That it came from nowhere, an anonymous package." A muscle moved at the corner of his jaw and went quiet. "I knew, the moment they said it, nobody else could have, nobody else was ever close enough." "No," she agreed. "Nobody else was ever close enough." 6 years. He said it the way Rizzo had once said it, in a hallway a lifetime ago, but where Rizzo's had been an accusation, Dario's was something that had had 17 months to cure into a kind of awe. "You were there 6 years, in my house. You read every room for me. You told me to make Tommy Calabria wait until morning. You told me the Marchetti kid would come back pointing a gun, and he did, 8 months later, except by then I had no one to point one back." His hands flattened on the table. "I followed your advice for 4 years and never once knew I was being." "You weren't being handled." She said it sharply, and it surprised them both. "Not for the last 4 years. That's the part you'll never believe, and it's the only part that matters. The job was finished in year 4. I had everything. I could have ended you any time for 2 whole years, and I didn't." "Why?" Here it was, the question. The reason she had told herself she came for closure, when what she had really come for was the chance to answer it out loud, once, to his face, so one of them would finally have heard it said. "Because of the night Marta died." Her voice did not shake. She had decided, driving here, that it would not, and she was a woman who kept the promises she made to herself, which was the whole tragedy of her. "I had everything I needed by then. I'd photographed your ledger that afternoon, the one in the safe you thought only you could open. I was finished. And then I found you in that back room holding the hand of a dying cook so she wouldn't go alone, and you cried, and you asked me why I never asked you for anything." She drew a breath. "And I sat down on the other side of that bed, and I understood I'd rather die than hand you over. I came to destroy you, and I fell in love with you instead, you impossible, frightened man. I built the thing that could end you, and then I couldn't deliver it for 2 years, because I loved you." The room was very quiet. "And then," she said, and now, finally, something moved in her face that had not moved on the night of the party. You stood up in front of 300 people and told me I had never meant anything, that I was convenient, that you'd never loved me, and I knew you were lying. I knew it while you said it. I held a door open for you and you wouldn't walk through it, so I closed it, and I burned everything in one night. Because the only thing in the world I could not survive was being told that the realest thing I'd ever felt had been a fool's mistake the whole time. Dario looked at the woman across the table, the woman who had loved him enough to spare him for 2 years and hated him enough to destroy him in a single night, and who had come back, 17 months later, to tell him both in the same breath. He understood, with the clarity that comes to men who have lost everything and have nothing left to protect, that he had been the architect of his own ruin in a way that had nothing to do with money or warrants or frightened men. He had been ruined the moment he decided the safest place to keep the only thing he loved was somewhere no one, including her, would ever know he kept it. I loved you, he said. The words came out rough, like something used for the first time after long disuse. On the night of the party, before it, for years, I sat with Marta while she died because you told me once the worst thing in the world was dying with no one's hand in yours, and I couldn't get it out of my head, and halfway through that night I understood I was doing it because of you. Everything good I did in the last 4 years of my life I did because some part of me was trying to be a man you could. He stopped. His jaw worked. I never said it. In my world you don't say it. You don't ever let them see where you keep your heart, because the moment they see it, they take it. A sound came out of him that was almost a laugh and was not one. And I lost everything anyway, to the one person I was hiding it from. You could have walked through the door. I know. I held it open. I know. He looked at his own flattened hands. 300 people watching, and I'd spent 46 years learning that needing someone where they can see is how you die. I looked at you holding that door open, and the only thought in my head was that if I walked through it, everyone would know exactly where my heart was kept. He raised his eyes. So I killed the thing in public so no one could ever use it against me. And by morning, I'd lost the thing, and the empire, and the public I killed it for, and every single thing the lie was supposed to protect. He had understood her completely, in the end. That was the cruelty the universe saved for last. They saw each other now, fully, the way they never had across all those years of careful invisibility. 2 people who had each spent a lifetime making sure no one could reach the place where they could be hurt, and who had reached it in each other anyway, and ruined each other with it. What happens now? Dario said. Lena was quiet a long time. Outside the glass, the guard checked his watch. The visit had a clock on it, the way everything between them had always had a clock on it, from the moment a side door clicked shut on a cold night 17 months and a lifetime ago. I have a house near water, she said at last. I can't sleep without the sound of it. I never could. You're the only person I ever told that, and you remembered it for 17 months in a cell, which is how I knew when I walked in here that I'd been right about you the whole time. She unfolded her hands. You have 11 years before you can ask anyone for anything. 11 years and 4 months. You're counting. There's not a great deal else to do. She stood. She had decided, driving here, what she would do at this moment, and she had decided it would be the hardest thing she had ever done, which was to do nothing. To say her piece and rise and walk out a second door and let the clock that had always governed them run out for good. She was a woman who kept the promises she made to herself. She got as far as the door. Her hand was on it. The guard reached for the lock on the other side of the glass. Lena. She stopped. She did not turn around. It was the first time in 17 months anyone had said the name, and the name had been a lie, a constructed thing, a tool, and it had also been the only true thing she had ever been, and hearing him say it did something to the back of her knees that no training had ever prepared her for. I don't expect you to wait, he said to her back. I have no right to ask you for a single thing in this world, and I know it. But I spent my whole life keeping my heart somewhere no one could find it, and the joke of it, the thing I think about at 4 a.m, is that you found it anyway. 6 years ago, the first time you poured the wine and read the room and asked me for nothing. His voice did the rough, broken thing again. So I'm going to say it now, in a room with no one watching but a guard who doesn't care, because that's the one thing I never gave you. I'm saying it where it can't win me anything and can't protect me from anything and can only be true." She stood with her hand on the door. "I love you," Dario Vanni said, to the back of the only person who had ever reached him. "There's nobody watching and nothing to gain, and I'm saying it anyway. That's the door I should have walked through. I'm walking through it now. 17 months too late and from inside a cell, but I'm walking through it." For a long moment, the woman by the door did not move at all. Then she reached up, and from the collar of her coat, she unpinned a small thing and set it on the ledge by the door, lining it up neat with the edge the way she lined up everything, the way she had lined up a staff badge on a side table on the worst night of both their lives. It was a visitor's pass with a lawyer's name on it that was not her name. She did not need it anymore. She was not coming back as a lawyer. 11 years and 4 months, she said, her hand still on the door, still not turning around, because if she turned he would see her face, and her face was no longer doing the thing she had promised it would do in the car. That's a long time to keep a house by the water with a room nobody's using. Then she turned, and she let him see it. All of it, the thing that had not been on her face on the night of the party, the thing she had driven 1,000 miles and become a fake lawyer and broken every rule she had left to come and find out whether it was safe to feel again. "Don't keep me waiting 11 years and then say the wrong thing when you get out," she said. "I burned a kingdom over the wrong thing once. I don't have another one in me. I'll have 11 years to practice the right one. See that you do." The guard opened the door. The clock had run out, the way it always did with them. But for the first time in either of their lives, the clock running out did not mean the end of something. It meant the start of a count, 11 years and 4 months long, kept by a man in a cell who finally knew where his heart was, and a woman in a house by the water who had stopped lying to herself at last, listening every night to the sound that let her sleep, keeping a room nobody was using, for somebody who was, against all the odds the world had ever offered either of them, coming home. Outside, the afternoon had gone to the flat iron gray that comes off cold water. The woman who had a different name now, and would need another one soon, walked across the prison lot to a plain car and did not look back at the building, because she did not need to. She knew exactly where he was. She had always known exactly where everyone was. It was her gift. The difference now was that, for the first time in her life, there was one person in the world she wanted to keep track of, not because he was a target, or a mark, or a job that wouldn't end, but because, in 11 years and 4 months, she intended to be standing in a doorway when he came through it. And this time, both of them would walk through,